Mm.
Don't know if anyone's getting in here yet, but welcome, welcome. Just starting up the stream here, my first live stream on YouTube. Pretty excited. Just getting everything going here. Hope the sound is okay. Just trying to get some set up here. Sorry if you're waiting around. All right. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to my first live stream. Today we're going to be making a game in Unreal Engine 5. Hope the sound is okay here. I think it's actually a little loud. Just give me one moment. Sorry about that. So let's see if I got this set up here. I have opened up a new project in Unreal Engine 5, and that is using the third person example project, and that is going to look something like this. Okay, so now we're in the engine here. I've called it the first live stream game because it is my first live stream on YouTube. And if we jump in here, you're going to see that it's just the third person example project that comes with Unreal Engine 5. Nothing too fancy here, although they do have the nice fancy leg stuff going on here with the kinematics. However, what we are going to do is we're going to add a bit more functionality to this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is I'm just going to restructure this project a little bit because right now it's obviously exactly as it comes by default. And typically I would name this folder the name of the project that I'm working on. But for this, I'm just going to give my name. And then in here, I'm going to make a blueprints folder. And then in here, we're going to want to store all of the blueprints for our game. And I do also just want to point out at this time that if there is anyone who jumps in, feel free to ask some questions. I'll definitely try my best to create some stuff live here. That is kind of the whole point of doing this. But for now, what I'm going to do is in this blueprints folder, we need to set up a folder for our core components and a folder for our characters. And that is a folder, not a blueprint class. And it's not a folder called folder, it's a folder called characters. Characters, apparently. So in our core folder, what we're going to do here is I'm going to add a player controller. And I am going to call that dev. And then I'm also going to make a game mode, and I'm going to call this dev as well. And this is just what I like to do to set up some base stuff that I can throw logic into and just kind of test stuff out without having to commit to naming it or having any sort of direct, I don't know, framework or whatever you want to call it. So once you've got those created here, what you can do is come over to the world settings here. And then I'm just going to add those in here under the player controller and the game mode. Or, sorry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the game mode and then set the player character. I'm a little nervous. It is my first live stream again. But we're going to get through this. And we're going to learn together. So once you've got all of this stuff set up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to create a new character. And for this character, I'm just going to call this the base character. Because the idea is that we're going to use this for both our character, or the idea is we're going to use this character for both our player and our AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this class here. I'm going to set the class in our game mode. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to immediately create a child blueprint of this class, and I'm going to call this the player character. And then I'm just going to create one more, and I'm going to call this the AI character. And then I'm going to create one more folder in here called AI, and let's drop this in here. And this is the basic setup for creating a character that's usable for multiple systems, I guess. So I'm going to open the player character here as well. And you can see by default, we don't really have anything in here. Unreal Engine 5 does provide a few characters that you can use for example. And they also do have animations all set up and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw in the Quinn in here. So the half height for this should be 90. And then our capsule radius, I'm actually going to drop this down to 28 here. And you can see now in the player character, all of this stuff is transferred over. And that's because the player character is derived from the base character. So there is one important distinction between the base character and the player character. And that is that the player character is going to be possessed by a player, but the base character can be possessed by a player controller or an AI controller. So for a camera that we want the player to look through specifically, we can actually put that on the player character, and then we don't have to worry about changing any of those settings on the AI. So I'm just going to go in here and add a spring arm, and then add a camera to that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to a length of 550. And then we can also move it up a little bit on the Z. And I'm going to do that on the target offset. And then add a little bit to the socket offset as well. And basically what this does is the target offset changes the actual point of this red line here in world space. So if I just remove all of, I'm not going to go too much into that right now, but I do have it explained in a video. You can find that on my channel. So once we've got this set up here, we do need a way to control the character. And because I started this with the third-person example map, we actually have a bunch of controls here by default. So we're just going to set some of these up here inside the player controller, or inside the player character. And what I like to do is actually create a new graph here, just called the input graph. And this will allow you to separate all of your inputs from all of your logic. I like to do the same thing as well if I'm setting up bindings between different classes. This allows you to set up everything in different events there, and then you can just call those events on other graphs. It makes things so much easier. And I understand that this is probably not the best content for a live stream here, but I do just feel like pointing out one more time that this is my first live stream. Welcome. Thanks for watching the VOD. Yeah, we're learning together. And so I decided for my first live stream, we might as well create a blank project. I don't really have anything set up in terms of teaching what I'm doing, but if anyone decides to jump in and ask any questions, I'm happy to answer, and I'll show you whatever you want, as long as I can make it within the time frame of a live stream, of course. So setting up our inputs here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a forward backward and a right left. And then I'm going to drag those over here, and I'm going to also add the camera, which should be look up down and turn left right. I'm going to use the mouse, and I need the events. Okay, and here we're just going to set up these to use the control rotation, which means I need to go to the spring arm over here and actually use the pawn control rotation. And there's going to be a few settings in here that we want to use for our AI that we don't want to use for the character, for the player character. So what we're going to do is come in here, and then we can just disable use control. We can just disable the use controller rotation yaw. And then this way, that's going to allow us to only have the spring arm control the direction of the camera, and it won't stay locked to the character's rotation. Take a little drink of water here. Okay, hopefully there were no smacks in there. And we're going to go back to making this input here. So I'm going to drag that off and go control rotation. Add controller rotation. And for the look up down, that's going to be pitch. And for the turn left right, that's going to be yaw. Pretty simple for the camera. And for the movement over here, we're going to get the control rotation. If I can spell today. And then what we can do over here is we can actually split this pin struct and then create a rotator. And then from here, we can get the forward and right vectors. And then if you drag off of here, you can go add movement input. And this will give us our movement as well. And I do just feel like pointing out one more time, this is my first live stream. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the VOD. I don't really have anything set up here to teach, but we are learning together. So if I come over here and jump in, you're going to see that the game freezes for some reason. And I believe that would be over here as the base character. We actually want that to be the player character. And there we go. However, I did not set up the animations here. So over here, you can just set the anim class to the ABP, and I guess the Quinn one is different. It's just derived from Manny, so I'll set the Quinn here. And there we go. However, I didn't actually set the rotation, so let's just go in here for now. Orient rotation to movement, and I'm just going to set this to 560. I believe that's the default. And there we go. You can see that window is a little small. One thing I like to do is go in here and you can actually change the resolution of that window as it gets created. And this little button here makes sure that it always spawns in the center of your screen. Remember to drink your water. And so now if I open the game here, it's going to be a little bigger. But we can't jump. Oh no, and that's because the jump isn't added in here. And they have defaults for both the jump event and the jump action here. Just feel like pointing out one more time quick that this is my first live stream here. Get that this isn't the best content, but if you have any questions, I will definitely... I'm happy to show you how to make anything you want, if I can fit it into a live stream. One thing we can do here is just drag off of jump and type jump one more time to get the jump action. And there we go. The default jump is always so small here. Set that to 560 as well. Losing my voice, jeez. All right, so now we got a bit of a higher jump going. And so now that we've got a character moving around, it would probably be great to set up something that the character can do. So setting up an AI immediately might be a little much, but one thing that we can do to get the character acting at least is interacting with stuff. So if we want to set up interactions, what would be a good way to go about that here? The way that I typically like to set up interactions is to create some components. One component goes on the character that's going to be interacting, and the other component goes on the object that it's going to be interacting with. And then that way the system is kind of reusable and you can use it with anything you want. So what we can do here is in our blueprints folder, I'm actually going to create another folder, and I'm just going to call this systems. And I'm going to make one called the interaction system. And so the main thing to remember about this is that anything that's going to be interacting is probably going to be a character. And anything that's going to be interacted with is most likely not. So to make sure that we have a bit of a distinction there, we can actually make a blueprint actor, which is going to be the base class for any object that gets interacted with. But we can assume that anything that's going to be an interactor, we can just attach the component directly to a character. So I'm just going to call this the interactable here. And then I'm going to create another folder called components. In this folder here, you can see that we can create an actor component. And this is very similar to the way that the movement component works on a base character over here. Basically, this is all of the functionality that divides a character from a pawn, other than a few other things that they've written in C++ directly within the class. And so we can basically do this ourselves. However, it's going to be a little less complex. So I'm going to rename this over here to actor component interactive. We'll start with the interactor. And then we can go to our player character over here and then just add the interactor component. And there's a few things that we're going to need on anything that can interact with objects in the world. The main thing is it's going to need some sort of trigger that tells it whether or not it has anything to interact with. And for that, we're just going to use a sphere collider, and it's going to be generated at runtime. So to do that, to make sure to make sure that we can do that, the easiest way is just to create a function. And I'm going to call that find interactables. And this is just going to create a sphere trace and check to see if we have any interactables nearby. So we can type in sphere trace and make sure that you do a multi-sphere trace so that it can detect multiple objects. And if you do it by channel, you can actually determine the specific type of actor that's going to be detected. So, oh, sorry, we don't want channel, that's my bad. What we actually want is trace for objects. If you were trying to find anything with invisibility, the channel would be a good way of doing that. Or you can set up specific channels over in here. You've got your collision. And over here you can set up trace channels, which means if we were to go into our interactable over here and add in a static mesh, then what we could do is we could go down to our collision over here and then go to custom. And anything that we create there will add to our trace responses here, which will then allow us to specifically direct which objects we want to be interacted with that way. However, our system's not quite going to be that complex. So the easiest way to do that would just be to set the type of objects that are going to be interacted with. And it's mad right now because it wants an array for this. So you can just go make array. And by default here, it's going to want world static. What we can do is select pawn. Or sorry, what we want to do here is select world dynamic. And that's going to give us any actor that's not a static actor. And that's going to give us a good way of making sure we can figure out whether or not we're trying to find interactables or scene components. And it's going to allow us to ignore any of that stuff in the visibility checks. And the last thing we need here is a radius. So I'm actually going to drag off of this and go to promote to variable. And I'm going to go interact radius. And make sure to make this instance editable. And then if I go over to the player here and click on that, we can actually set our radius to whatever we want. But I do want the default, so I'm just going to set this over here to 200. And if you go to the debug draw, you can go to draw for one frame. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to allow you to see this while you're moving. And it's going to make sure that it's going to allow you to make sure that everything is working properly. So in our interactor, we can do this on event tick just to make sure that we're always getting our interactables. And right now we're not putting them anywhere. Right now we're not really putting them anywhere, but I just want to make sure that it's actually working here, because you can see that I actually don't see that here. And I'm actually not sure why. So you can see over here that so I feel like pointing out one more time that this is my first live stream on YouTube here. So I'm a little nervous. I don't have too much prepared. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the VOD. And we're learning together. So you can see here that I do have the player character added to the game mode over here. And if we go to the player character does have this interactor, and the range is set here to 200. And this interactor on event tick is finding interactables. But you can see here we don't actually have a start or end. So it's actually creating this at the center of the world, which I'm actually not sure where that is. Oh, yeah, so you can see it's actually spawning that over here. And that's not what we want. We actually want, obviously we want this to surround the character. So one thing we can do is we can just go get owner. And that's going to get the owner of this component. And then we can just drag off of here and go get world transform or location. We can go get actor location. That's the one we want right there. And then if we drag that into the start and the end, because the size of it is going to be based on that radius, that is going to give us the one surrounding the character. And you can see as I move around here, it's not detecting any of the static geometry, but it's also not detecting these, which is dynamic geometry. And that's actually exactly what we want. And just to make sure that this is detecting stuff here in general, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our characters. Let's try that one more time here. Let's go into our characters. I'm going to drag an AI in here, and I just want to make sure that it turns green on the AI. And it does not. So we can figure this out one more time here. I believe for the AI, it actually does need to be pawn. I'm not sure why the world dynamic isn't working here. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to drag this off and go multi-sphere. And what we're just going to do here is go back to channel. I wanted to show something cool, but I didn't prepare. Do your homework, guys. So I'm going to draw this for one frame here. And because we're tracing visibility now, this should be detecting everything. So what we want to do here is we actually want to drag off of this and go for each, which is going to create a loop that will allow us to see everything that we're detecting with this sphere trace. And basically we can break this. And then we can check to see which actor we're hitting. And we just want to cast this to an interactable. And this way we can make sure that we don't pass this point unless we are actually found an interactable actor. And because we've put this into a function here, what we can actually do is we can store all of these within a local variable. And that's going to allow us to do actions to all of these without having to do actions to... That's going to allow us to manipulate all of the interactables without having to manipulate all of the found components from the sphere trace. This is my first live stream, guys. Thanks for watching. So once we get over to this point here, we are going to add these two interactables. And I like to put an L at the end of anything that's a local variable, just so I don't forget the difference. If your functions get really complicated, it can be easy to lose track of which of your variables are local and which of your variables are global. As well, if you add an L to the end of any of your local variables, you can actually name them the same thing as your global variables, just with an L at the end. And it's pretty convenient. So we actually want to make this an array here. And because this is a local variable to a function, it's going to reset itself every time the function gets called. So every time this happens, we're actually going to be making a new array of interactables. And that's going to add those over here. And then once we've got all of those set, what we can do is come off of this complete, and we can go return, grab this interactable array here, return that, and then we can just remove the L. So as this component updates, it's going to find all of the interactables, but then we don't really know what we're doing with them. So we obviously only want to be able to interact with one thing at a time. And in a third-person game like this, the easiest way to do that is to figure out where the camera is looking. However, it's a little different than an FPS game. Because if you think about the way an FPS game works, your camera is always centered on the character. So as you're looking through the character's eyes, the very center of the screen is going to be what you're looking at. So you don't really have to worry about whether or not things are a little offset. Like right now, in an FPS game, I would be looking directly ahead at that wall, and the game could be pretty confident that I'm not looking at this character. However, if I wanted to talk to this character, and I run up to it like this, I'm expecting this to talk to the character. So we're going to want to make sure that we can actually figure out the closest object to the center of the camera within reason, rather than trying to find a specific object that's directly in the center of the camera. And so because of that, we actually can't use a line trace, because that's obviously just going to give us the direct point of the center, which is why we're doing this here. It's going to find all of the interactables that we have. And what we want to do next is create another function to get the best interactable. And we could go ahead and just add all of the interactables that this found to an array that we can use in our global variables entry. However, we can also just give this function an input and give it the output of this function. And then we don't have to worry about storing anything that we don't need later, which is always something that I opt for if possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually add an array of objects here as well. Interactables. If I can type. I'll point this out one more time. This is my first live stream. It's removing my ability to type. It's removing my ability to talk. It's removing my ability to think. But thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the stream. Thanks for watching the VOD. We're learning together. So over here, I'm just going to call this interactables. And we need to make sure that this is an array. And over on the event graph here, we can also go and get our best interactable. And because we're getting something, we're also going to want a return, which will be a single interactable. I'm going to call the output of the interactable the best interactable. And then we can also give this a Boolean called return value. And what this will allow us to do is just check whether or not we actually have a valid best interactable without having to add any extra logic to our graph later. So over here, we can add this to a local array as well. And I'm not going to show this here, but basically what adding these to a local variable does is it allows you to remove entries from the variable without having to remove entries from the actual incoming variable, which doesn't matter right now because it's all just functions passing to functions. But if you're using a global variable array to do stuff like this, you definitely want to make sure that you're using local arrays to make sure that you don't have to edit the global array. If that makes sense. Oh, remember to drink your water, guys. But for now, we are just going to make this very simple. So we are going to have our interactables here. And what we want to do is we just want to figure out which one is closest to the center of the screen. And we can do that using a little bit of vector math. One thing we're going to need in our interactable, because we could use the interactable's location to figure out the closest to the screen. However, typically you're not looking directly at an object when you're using it. A lot of the times you're looking at the UI that the object creates. So what I want to do here is I just want to create a little dev UI that we can use. And I'm going to do that over here in a new variable, and I'm going to call this widgets. And I'm just going to create a user widget over here. And I'm just going to call this interact widget. And I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but for some reason in Unreal Engine 5, they don't give you a panel by default. So every time you make a user widget, you have to go in here and drop a canvas panel. You don't have to, but it makes things much easier to work with. And then depending on which size you want, you can just go up here and change it to custom, custom on screen, whatever you want. I'm going to go to desired on screen. And I'm also going to drop a border in there and then a piece of text. For the border, I want it to size to content, which, and then you want to add the text to the border. That's important. First live stream, we're learning together. I want to make sure that the border is not the same color as the text. And you can do that either by changing the content color because it's not really going to affect the text, but the brush color is definitely preferred. And I'm just going to make this a little transparent. And we can also give the text a little bit of a buffer. One thing I really love about Unreal Engine 5 as opposed to Unreal Engine 4 is the UI in Unreal Engine 4 is a mess. Every single component here has its own slot, and you can change the padding for one and then go to the next and change the padding for its children, and it's going to add like extra padding, and it's super convoluted. But basically what we can do here is we can actually just change the padding of this text, and it's going to change it perfectly within the border and everything else. So I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to add a padding of 16. And it's just going to make it a little easier to look at. But I'm thinking now that this is actually going to be too big, like the text in general. So I'm actually going to set this to something like 6. And I'm going to set the font size to something like 12. And I think this will look a little better on screen. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll figure it out. And once we've got this created here, we can go back to our interactable. And where I've got this static mesh here, we're just going to add this to the static mesh. If you type widget, you'll get this widget here. And just to make sure it's working here, if you go to the widget class, you can do that. And there's our widget over here. In Unreal Engine 4, you had to choose the size, and it's really annoying. But over here, you can actually just do draw at desired size in Unreal Engine 5, and it works perfectly. Manual redraw is really only necessary if the UI is going to change. And you can see over here that this UI looks really, really bad. And that's because it's currently being spawned in world space, which earlier I skipped over, but I just wanted to make sure that it's working. What you can do now is if you go over here and you go to screen, it's actually going to remove that from here, but it's only going to draw it on the viewport, which will allow us to see it in game. And it's going to be at the location of the static mesh here. And I feel like I'm leading you guys astray here. I just realized a massive problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is we're actually going to create the component for the interactable right away as well. And one thing we want to do with this component is, okay. So basically the problem here is the interactable class here is derived from the actor, and the character is derived from the character. So if we want to interact with an AI, the way that it's currently being set up is actually not going to work. And this is why you do your homework, kids. But we're going to work this out. So what we want to do is we actually want to spawn a UI object directly onto this character, and then we control it that way. And the way that we're going to do that is actually not by spawning this widget component onto the character. We're actually just going to create a blueprint class to hold the widget, and then we can add that blueprint class to the character. So in here, I'm actually going to not create a new folder. We're going to create a new blueprint class, and I'm going to call this actor. It's going to be the BP interact widget. Then we can just go over here, X that out, and paste it here. And then if I go to the interactable here, we can make a function for setting that up and call it onBeginPlay. And the first thing we want to do when we set this up is we just want to make sure that we're adding that widget to whatever owns this component. And let's see here. So that we can spawn actor from class. We can spawn the BP interact widget, and we are going to need a transform for that. It's going to give us a little bit of a fit if we don't. Well, we can just split that for now and it works just fine. Once we've got that, we can drag off and promote that to a local variable. And do keep in mind that this isn't actually a widget, it's a blueprint holding a widget, but I'm going to call it widget because that works for me. This is my first live stream. We're learning together. So we are going to want this positioned on our character, but there's a good chance we're actually going to want to control the position ourselves. So one thing we can do is we can add a variable here, and I'm going to call this widget offset. I'm going to make that a vector. And I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to set this to something like, I'm going to set that to 110 because the half height of our character is 90, which means the total height, so that means the half height of 110 is going to put the widget just a little bit above the character. Remember to drink your water. Okay. So now we want to take this offset and we want to spawn this widget onto whatever is controlling it at the offset. So to do that, like before, we can get the owner, and we can get the actor location. And then we can just add the offset. And again, I know this probably isn't the best content for a live stream, but again, it's my first live stream. Can't really think very well, or straight. So we're learning together. Okay, so once we've got this here, and it's going to be attaching itself to our actor, I just want to make sure that all of this is working before we move forward. And I believe here we are adding the AI character. I'm not sure why I deleted that, but we can add that back here. And let's open that up. And we want to make the AI character interactable. So if I go ahead and add that in here, I also just want to make sure that our offset is a instance editable variable. That's going to allow us to see that over here in the defaults. I'm also just going to add that to a category called settings. I don't think I did that over here, did I? All right. I just realized that this is very messy up here as well. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Going to move the actor components here together, move the widget over here, and these can be over here. Okay. So this is going to make our AI interactable, but you're not going to be able to see the widget in the blueprint screen here. It's only going to be visible in game, which means it's going to be a little weird to set your offset. There are ways that you can use 3D widgets to actually set a direct location, but I'm not going to set that up right now. If anyone wants to see it, go ahead and ask, and maybe I'll show it. But yeah, we're going to skip that for now. So right there, you can see that the text appears above the AI, but it's kind of showing up all the time. We don't really want that, right? We only want it to show up when we're actually about to interact with the AI. So that's just going to have to turn itself off by default. And because we put that into its own blueprint, we can actually control that pretty easily. So in here, I'm just going to create a function called showUI. And we can add a little Boolean to this called hide. I'm going to drag off a branch here. And if you type get widget on this component, that's how you get the actual widget that's on the viewport in the game. And then we can just go set visibility. And if hide is true, we want to set the visibility to collapsed. And if hide is false, we want to set the visibility to visible. Okay, so that's going to let us show or hide our UI. And this function should be public. So we can go back to our actor component here. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our interactable, which is going to give us this here. It's going to set this to a local variable, and then we want to show UI. And we can just click hide. Ooh, make sure you click that little Boolean there. And now if I jump in here, you can see that it's gone. But we're not making it pop back up. So to do that, we actually need to be able to find an interactable with our interactor. So we can jump back here now, where we have our array of interactors, or where we have our array of interactables on our interactor. And we need to figure out which interactable is closest to the center of the screen, within reason, to figure out whether or not there's anything that we can interact with. And to do that, we're just going to use a little bit of vector math with the vectors. This is my first stream, guys. Thanks for watching. So what we can do here is we can drag off of here and go for each. And on completed, we're just going to add this return node down here for now. And there's actually a little bit more we're probably going to do. So I'm going to drop in a sequence by holding S. And what we want to do is we want to figure out where each of these are in world space and whether or not it is the closest object. And to do that, what we need to do is just store the dot position for the object in world space. And I'm going to do that by calling this dots_l. And this is going to be an array of floats. And so we've got our interactables here. Oh, interesting side tangent. So right now we're just using the object's location to find interactables over here, or for where the interactable trace is happening. We could also do this with an offset as well, but I'm going to avoid it for now because it is a little more complicated than with the interactables. But just something you could do. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get owner, and we're going to get the actor location. And we can get the actor location for this as well. Oh, my bad. That's why we set up the UI. Do your homework. Over here in our interactable, we need to create one more function. And this is going to be called getInteractLocation. It's going to return a vector. And we just want to get the world location for our interact widget, which we actually should be storing globally as well. So rather than storing this local variable at all, I'm just going to make it global. And then over here, we can just go get world location. Oop. And this should give us what we want here. Make sure to make this function pure. That way you don't have to worry about connecting a execution line or anything there. Why are these not straight? There we go. Weird. And I do know that this probably isn't the most entertaining content for a live stream, but if you do have any questions about game design, feel free to ask. If it's something that I can fit into a live stream, I will absolutely try my best to make it here now. We're learning together. All right, so we've got our interact location here, which means back over here we can get our interact location. Or maybe we can't. That's because we actually need to do that directly on the blueprints. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to get our interactable component. And then from there, we can get our interact location. And I've always found this to be a little clunky. So one thing I like to do whenever I have to do stuff like this is to just set up a library to make things look a little more neat. Drink of water, one sec. So one thing we can do is we can jump out here. We can go back to our blueprints, and I'm going to create another folder in here called Toolbox. And then in this folder, I'm going to create another folder called Libraries. And then in here, that's the wrong window. We can go into the blueprints, and we can create a function library. So I'm going to call this FL. So I'm going to call this interact helpers, and then I'm going to backpedal, and I'm going to move this into the interact system. Make sure to go move here. And then I'm going to call this get interactable component. And this just needs to take in an actor. And then it needs to return a component. Okay, and now basically what we can do is we can go over here, and then we can cut that out here and paste it in here. And do this. I'm going to make this a peer function. And then I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to call this get interact location. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to replace this with a vector. Drag this in here. And get the interact location. Make sure not to choose the one in the function library that you're creating right now, because then it's just not going to do anything at all. Nothing. And then once we've got that set up here, we can just jump back here and go get interact location. And because we don't have access to the actual function within the class here, it's actually just going to give us our function library helpers. And we could use either one and set up the other logic again, but we can just do this. And what we want to do is we actually want to get not the actual offset between these vectors, but we want to get the dot orientation between these vectors. So one thing that we can do is go dot product. And I believe it's the interactable to the interactor, but we can switch that around if we need to. And that's going to give us oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's not right at all. I believe what we want to do actually is subtract these. I actually don't remember how this works. All right, so we've got this. We want to subtract those, and we also need the camera. So we can get the player controller. And we can get the player camera manager. And there should be a way to access the camera here with the get camera location. And we should also be able to get the rotation. With the rotation, we want the forward. And there's something we want to do with this, but we need to normalize it first. Is it maybe just the dot product of these? I don't know. We're learning together. This is my first live stream. I can't think straight. Thanks for watching. All right, so once we've got this here, we want to add this to our array of dots. I'm going to assume this is correct until we figure out otherwise. And this is presumably going to give us the dot orientation of the interactable object, the interactor, based on the camera's orientation in world space. Easy stuff, right? Simple stuff. Do your homework. All right, so the last thing we want to do is we just want to figure out which one of these is the best dot. And we can do that by storing a local variable here as well. For both the dot and the actual object that's with it, with the actual interactable as well. And we are actually getting the component here. Okay, I see what I did here. So this here, we're actually going to want to change this. For the reasons I explained earlier, we don't need to store that as a local variable. So I'm just going to drag that over here. And one thing we want to do is we do want to actually keep a running tally of all of the components that we're adding. So I'm actually just going to make an array of these as well. And then over here, we can just add those. We're not getting the components. Well, we can do that here. I've made like 500 different kinds of this system using different logic processes. And I feel like right now I'm combining 3 of them together. But we're going to make this work. Thanks for watching, guys. So basically, once we get this far here, we got all of our components and all of our dots, which we actually no longer need here. But it's going to make things easier, I guess. So we can just grab our interactables here and go for a for loop. And the way that this works is because we've added all of the interactables and all of the dots at the same time here through this loop, all of the indices between the two arrays are going to match up. So all we need to do is figure out which one of them is the best, and the other one will just be perfect, which is actually why we're going to use the dots here. We're not going to use the interactables. So basically what we want to do now is we just want to run through all of these dots and figure out which one is closest to 1. 1 is going to be the center of the camera, I believe. I can't think straight right now. First live stream, guys. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use this best dot variable here. It starts off at 0, and we just want to add any dot that we find that is larger than the dot that is currently in the variable. So if I drag this here, and I just want to check if the dot in the array is greater than this, and if that is true, we can set our local variable to this variable. So by the time we get to the end of this array, whichever variable is the largest is going to be here. But it's possible that even though we found an interactable and it has the largest dot, it might not actually be close enough to the center of the screen to be considered interactable with in general. We're going to set that up in a moment, but there's still a potential that this doesn't work here. So we're going to figure that out first, and we'll come back. But for now, basically, once we've found our best dot, we can grab our interactable array here, and we can go get, and then we want to grab our dots, and we want to go find. We want to find the best dot in this dot array, and that is going to give us the index for our interactables array. And this is returning the blueprint, not the component. We're learning together, guys. This is my first live stream. So what we actually want to do here is rather than adding the components, we're not using this functionality anywhere in here. So we can just change this back to being the blueprint. We can change the variable type. That's not going to give us a problem here. And then we just need to change that here and add the actual blueprint. Don't miss your pins, guys. Make that look a little cleaner. And then we can drag that out here. And for now, we can just do a little isValid check here. So if we're returning a valid object here, then the return is going to be valid. So we don't have to do any extra checks to make sure whether or not that's going to work. Okay. However, we're still going to have to check this. This might not work. No. So we've got our interactor set up here. And I believe we've put that on our character here. We have our interact radius set up. Are we getting it here? We are not. So we want to get our best interactable. We want to know whether or not that's a valid interactable. And then we want to know whether or not we are currently selecting an interactable. So I can make a variable over here, not a function, a variable. And if I can remember how to type, that is going to give us our selected interactable. just to make sure that we can keep track of that for whatever happens. I don't know. This is my first live stream, guys. I can't think straight. We're learning together. So once we've got this here, we just want to check to see whether or not this is valid. And because we need the output as well, we can just do a validated check. And what we want to do here is create another function. And we are going to go set selected interactable. Here we can pass in the blueprint for the interactable. And you would think it's as easy as doing this. But all this stuff that I started setting up here needs to go there. Which means this output is useless. But it's there. Learning together. So we can basically check if this input is valid. And then, if it's not valid, we're actually just going to set the selected interactable to nothing. And that's going to allow us to use this for multiple purposes. But it's also going to mean that we need to add a sequence to the front of this logic here, which is just going to allow us to do something whether or not we've actually set a variable or not. So I'm just going to add a local Boolean in here as well. I'm going to take a drink of water as well. And what we're going to do here sorry guys, having a bit of a brain fart. Okay, so if it's not valid, we're going to set that to nothing. And we want this to be a Boolean. That's what I was doing here. So if we're setting this to false, we want this Boolean to be false. And if we have an interactable, we want to set the selected interactable to that. And then we want to set our Boolean to true. This sequence needs 3 pins. And actually, the first thing we want to do is we want to know whether or not we have a selected interactable. And this is going to allow us to deactivate the UI of the selected interactable before we select a new one. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but that just needs to be there because if I have another brain fart, we may overgo it. So throw that in there. And once we know whether or not we've set a interactable here, we can go down here to a branch and drag in this Boolean. And if we did set an interactable, we can just grab this here. You know what? I lied. This needs 2 pins. Because this is my first live stream, guys. I can't think very well. We're learning together. What we want to do here is, if we know we're setting a variable here, we can actually just set up everything we need here. So that's going to be fine. We have the UI hiding as the game starts. So what we actually want to do is we want to show it once we're here. And I believe the way we're doing that is we're just using that get UI, get interact. No, I forget how we're doing that. I believe it's on the interactable component. Show UI, and that is on our interact UI. It's on the widget itself. Or did I put that on the component here? Or the, okay, so it's on the blueprint of the widget. Which means we're going to have to add another function to our interactable blueprint here. Just be a gateway for show UI. So I'm going to create another function here called show UI, and it's going to have a boolean called hide. Then we can grab our interact UI here and go show UI. And then we can just connect all of that over here. And then if we go to the interactor, we've got the blueprint here. And just go, no, we can't. That's the blueprint. Okay, we're one step behind. I see what's going on here. This is my first live stream, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag off of here. And no, we're not. We are going to go back to the interactable blueprint and create one more function. Are we? I got it. We're going to come over here, and we're going to get the interactable component. And then we're going to go show UI. And that is going to let us show you the UI. Over here, I can drag this and copy. And then we just want to hide the UI for our previous interactable. And that is going to allow us to show the player whether or not they have anything that they're interacting with. So let's go out here and doesn't work. And that's because I don't believe we finished setting up that logic, but I figured I'd give it a shot. Hey, who knows? So we are setting our selected interactable, but I don't believe we're calling that anywhere. Oh, we are. Set selected interactable. Okay, so it's going to be doing this every frame. And that's because I kind of skipped over a kind of important step here. And when we set the selected interactable, we just want to make sure that the interactable coming in does not equal the actual current selected interactable. Kind of an important part. Don't want to miss that one. So if we come in here, we only want to set this if they do not equal the same thing. I don't think that's going to fix what's going on here, but that is important. So let's trace our line here. The interactable is it's finding the interactables, it's getting the best interactable, and then it's setting the selected interactable, which should show its UI. But it's possible that it's not actually detecting the character. What am I doing for this here? Actually, I believe this is because we're casting it to the BP interactable. Because I'm a genius, and this is my first live stream. We're learning together, guys. So what we want to do is actually on this actor, we want to get the interactable component. And we want to check to see whether or not this is valid. And that is going to give us our interactable. Which is a little bit of a problem, actually. Yeah, like I said before, I've set this up like 500 times, and sometimes I use the blueprint, sometimes I use the component. Right now I'm using both and using it entirely. Do your homework, guys. So right now we've got this array right here of blueprints, which actually need to be components. And this return is being used for all of this, which is using blueprints, but it needs to be components. So And that is returning that, which is a blueprint, but needs to be a component. So let's start at the beginning. We're learning together, guys. This is my first live stream. All right. So the first thing we need is this is going to return the actor component. And that's going to give us a problem there, but that's fine. The next thing we want to do is change this to the components. And I've said this a couple of times before, but I don't know. I get this probably isn't the best content for a live stream, but if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. If it's something that I can fit within the time frame of a live stream, I will absolutely try to show you how it's done. But obviously, no promises. I'm not thinking very well. This is my first live stream. All right, so we can connect that down over here now. But we still have a few problems over here. Mainly because this is now returning components. And this wants a blueprint. And it's giving a little bit of a fuss here because this is empty. So this needs to be the interactable components, which is going to give me even more of a fuss, but let's get that here. I'm just going to disconnect this right now as well. I can turn that into the component. Also turn this one into the component. Connect those back up. And then in here, if we disconnect this, we can drag this back over. And this over here needs to be the component. Which, funny story, 30 minutes ago it was. I don't know how many times I can say this, guys, but it's my first live stream. So if we delete that there, we can then drag this back over, and that's going to connect our components. This down here wants blueprints, but we should be able to do this. And there we go, problem solved. Maybe. Hopefully. Kind of. Okay. We do also just want to return that interactable component. And all right, if that does not equal the selected interactable, we can enter this sequence. We no longer need to get the component. This is still the blueprint. This needs to be the actor component. All right, a few more issues, I'm sure. Let's see here. All right, yeah, so we don't need to get the, where's that one? Oh. All right, so we're good. Oh, no, we're not. Oh, yeah. So just collect that, connect that there and connect that there. And now, funny story. You know when we went to the blueprint over here, to the interactable blueprint, and did nothing? Okay. So now, if we go back over here, you can see that we are showing and hiding our UI. Everything is now set up with the interactable. And everything is connected here. So that will then allow us to go in here. Oh, no, find the interactables. And we are no longer actually casting it to that blueprint. So here's hoping. Nothing happens. Hoorah. So what else we got here? We need to figure out if anything is actually happening. So I'm just going to come in here and add a print. And I want to know whether or not this is true or false. You can come down in here and set the duration to 0. And that'll just make sure that it only updates once. Okay, so I think my dot math actually is wrong. I think it's very wrong. Let's see. Let's see. What is this returning as the best dot? Down here at the end. Let's see what our best dot is. 0. Okay, so this still is not detecting the character for some reason. Go back to the AI character here. It has the AC interactable. Which we know it has because it has the widget, which is currently hidden. This is super bizarre, guys. I don't know how many people are in here right now, but I bet you every single one of you, if you know what's going on, is laughing at me. And you know what? I deserve it. Because this is my first live stream, and I can't think straight. We're learning together. Okay, so we need to figure out what's happening here. We can see that this does have a collider. It is the AI character. If I go to my interactor here, every frame we are finding our interactables, but we're not even getting here. It's returning false, which means we are not actually presumably finding anything. So I'm going to go in here. And on every update, I just want this to return how long the array is here. So how many interactables does this think we have? Remember to set the duration there. And this thinks that we have 0 interactables. So it's not getting that there. We should be seeing that every frame. That's not going to help. It's very bizarre. So let's go to the AI character over here. It's possible that it's something to do with the collision set up on the pawn. I believe that it actually ignores visibility, which, hey, wouldn't you know it, is the channel we're using, right? So typically the way that you would do this is you would create your own trace channel for interactables. And the thing with that is between characters and between the base interactable BP that we've set up here, we would have to set that trace every time for our character model or on this blueprint for the static mesh or whatever you want to add in. And that's a lot of extra work that we could easily forget. So one thing that we can do here just to make that a little bit easier is if we come into our character and we come over to the capsule component, you can see here that it uses the camera. And if I go over to the interactor here, if I go to my trace channel, you can see that we have visibility and we have camera. So, now you know what? We'll set up a trace channel. Why not? I actually think this is the easiest way to do it, is just to set up a trace channel. So you have your object channels, which would be the object trace that I showed earlier. And then you also have your trace channels. So if I go in here and we go to ignore by default, and I set up a trace for interact, that is just in your project settings under engine collision. And we go to our AI here to our capsule component. And over here, we can change to a custom collision preset and just set that up to be, where is it here? Oh. Got to refresh that first. Then we can block the interact on the AI. And then I'm just going to go to the interactable here to the static mesh, mesh. Make sure that I set that up over here as well. And I'm sure there's something else wrong. Oh, you know what? Not even going to test it because we need to change the trace channel to interact. Now, I'm sure there's something else wrong. But you can see here that now we're not tracing visibility, so it's not actually turning green on any of the ground. And, ooh, okay, so first good sign. You can see that it turns green when we are detecting the character. So it can tell that there's an interactable component here. However, we're still returning false on our Boolean. And this says access none trying to read property actor. Get interactable component. In the interact helpers. Okay. Get interact component. Oh, you know what? We can fix this pretty easily. Just drag off here. Go is valid. Let's only continue if the actor is valid. Oh, get interact location is the problem. Maybe they were both problems. It's a good thing that that is actually failing because the character absolutely should be valid there. So I don't actually know what's going on here. It's a weird one. But just as a reminder, this is my first live stream. My brain is a bowl of soup. We're learning together. So what we're going to do here is I need to make one more string just to figure out exactly what's going on here. Just to make sure that is returning us 2 errors now. So we definitely are getting an invalid actor. So let's see if we can figure this out. Hey there, buddy. I'm a subscriber and I'm really thankful for your work. Just dropped in here to see what you're up to. Hey, Max Fun. Hope you're still here. Nice to see you. I am just up to a bunch of random crap, but it's going okay in my mind. I don't really have a plan, but if you do have any questions about something that you'd like to know how it's made, and it fits into a live stream, what do we have here? We've been going currently for an hour and a half, probably going for another half an hour or so. So let me know and I'll do my best to try and show you how that's done. Thanks for watching. But we do need to figure out what's going wrong here with our components. And I'm not quite sure exactly why the actor is returning invalid. And that's mainly because this is my first live stream and I can't think, but we're learning together. So, oh, yeah, you know, a funny story. If you don't add anything to an array, The array is going to be empty, guys. There, if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. That's just how it works. And it's still false. And it's still false. I really thought I had it there. This is really a strange one. All right, so what do we got here? We are returning the length. Oh, we are returning the length, which is 0. Oh, wait. The length is 1. The length is 1 now, but it's still false. Okay, so we have an interactable in our array. We do. It's there. It's just not getting here. So we can find it, but getting the best interactable is where things are going wrong. We're printing the dot, and then here I have the print for the false. Let's just figure out exactly what's going on in this function here. Just if anyone's curious, I don't know. This has been going for an hour and a half, and I actually have like a 45-second video on my channel for how to set up this entire system. If you're curious, that would be a much better watch. But if you're having fun, please stick around. This is my first live stream, and my brain is baloney, but we're learning together. Thanks for watching. So, let's see here. We are setting the selected interactable. Oh, no, sorry, this isn't right. We want to be here. So why is this returning false? It wants to know whether the best interactable component is valid. I actually don't think that is. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. I'll leave it for now. I wonder if I can get this to print the name of the best interactable. And it's going to be the component. All right, so we're going to print the display name of the owner of the component. Let's see if this gives us our AI character. We're getting nothing. Okay, so we're still getting access none, which means this array is empty. What? Okay, so we're passing in an array of 1 here. It goes through an array of 1. It gets to adding the dot and the interactable for that single array. And then that 1 just turns into 0. Fun. So why in here are we not getting this? One thing I'm going to do, just because Unreal Engine 5 is an amazing tool with absolutely no issues at all, I'm just going to check really quick to make sure that we're actually still getting 1 here at the beginning. And so I'm quickly just going to disconnect that here. And we can cut and paste this over here. And I just want to make sure that this array here is still getting a length of 1. Okay. Oh, did I keep that print string down here? Okay. Okay, so we're still getting an array of 1 here. How many times do we loop through this array? I'm sure the solution to this is probably right in my face. If anyone knows who's watching, don't tell me. Just laugh at me from a distance and enjoy. This is my first live stream, guys. All right, so it's not getting called, and we definitely only want this to be on a duration of 0. And okay, it is going through, which is a little more confusing. All right, so at this point, do we have a display name for this, or is it also invalid? Okay, now I'm very confused. Right here, we are adding our AI character to an array of interactable components. This array right here, the same thing. And then over here, when we go to get it, we're not able to. And you know what? I actually think I see the problem here. What we actually want to do is I'm getting the dot down here. That's not okay. What we actually want to do is we want to store an integer as well and call this best int. That is not okay. And then over here, whenever we do happen to set our best dot, we also want to set the best integer, just so we can remember which integer or which index that dot is at. And then, rather than doing this, we can just use our best index. And then we are still getting errors. And also I saw a print string in there that said hello. Okay. All right, so we're going through here. Wait. I'm kind of wondering if this never gets called. All right, let's see if this is getting called at all. Ah. All right, so let's see what kind of dumbness did I put here? Oh my. Oh no. Wait. Wait, what? I mean, it's working, kind of, but way wrong. Way wrong. It shouldn't be giving us any errors, but that is not correct at all. If anyone's actually curious about how to make this, please go and look at the video on my channel that's under a minute long. But if you're interested in the hysterical nonsense that's going on here, the absolute tragedy that is this interaction system, stick around, because this is my first live stream and we're learning together. Thanks for watching. So, all right, so that is incorrect for some reason, but it shouldn't be giving errors. So I'm going to jump down here for a moment. Okay, so for starters, this needs to be an absolute value. Because if we're under 0, it's not going to be larger than 0, for one. Not going to fix the problem, but that is a problem. So fix it. And the next thing we want to make sure is that this right here is happening on the complete of this loop so that it actually finishes the loop before we exit the function. That's a big one, guys. That's huge. That almost makes the loop completely pointless. Almost. First live stream. But now that that is there, does it just work? No. Worth a shot. I am actually very confused right now. Okay, so it goes into this loop. I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure we're calling false here. We're not calling false. Okay, so it was calling false earlier because of the loop skip. Now it is actually getting through this, which means we should be able to see which index it thinks we're on, which should be 0. All right, so it stays at 0. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come down here to the best int, and I'm going to set this to -1. So, yeah, so basically if there is no interactable within this system for it to find, it's just going to return -1 for the sake of this print experiment. So you can see there it's -1, and it is changing to 0. So it knows that it knows that there's one actor in this array, and it knows that the one that we want is the first one, the only one, the actor at the array of 0, index of 0. Does it still think it's invalid? Okay. Okay, so we have a valid actor component now. But there's still something that's going on there. Which, okay, we're getting there. We're getting there, guys. We are getting there. Alright, so that means we can jump. What's going on here? Means we can jump back out here. We are finding the interactables. We are getting the best interactable. Going to add that print back here one more time just to absolutely make sure that we are returning true from the function. And there it is. But there's something going on in here. I think. Now I don't know where those errors are happening. Let's see here. They are in the get interactable component, the interact helpers. Where am I calling that function? Oh. Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? All right, so we can get the owner of the actor component, which will be an actor, to fit into that interact location there. All right. All of that was because of a disconnected pin, but you know what, guys? It's my first live stream. Thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. I did notice there, though, that we are still not getting the UI. And that is a bit of a problem, because although we're not returning errors, this should be showing our UI. So finally, we just need to figure out what's going on in here. And to do that, once this looks a little cleaner here, I'm just going to run a print. And, okay, so if the selected interactable does not equal the interactable that's coming in, we want to come down here. And I'm just going to add a print here, and I want to make sure this is never getting called. Okay, so you can see here that it's only setting it to none when this actor is not possible to get selected, when it's not possible to select this actor. So that's what I'm looking for there. Next, we want to know if this is happening. So are we actually trying to show the UI of the actor? Do you see, guys? Okay, so these pins are on fire. Let's see what happens if we just hit play now. Still doesn't work, okay. But we're getting there. Okay, so now we are setting the selected interactable. Let's check to see if this is ever getting called. And it needs to be at a 2-second duration because it should only get called once. Yeah, so the selected interactable is never actually being set to that actor. That actor component. So, mm, I'm a little confused, but I'm not sure what else to say, so I just feel like pointing out that this is my first live stream, guys. Can't think very well, but we're getting through this. If you're actually curious on how to set up an interaction system, please check out my channel. I've got an interaction system, I've got a combat system, I've got some stuff. There's not a lot there, but just like this, we're getting there. But this is a very big question here. We get to set selected interactable, and the interactable is never actually getting set. So the best thing to do in this case is I'm actually just going to remove all of this and drag it down there. And when we call set selected interactable, all I want to do is I want to check to see if this is valid. All I want to do is set the selected interactable. And then I'm going to print a string. I'm going to print a string. And it is going to say hello, I guess. This is going to check to see if this is valid. I also feel like pointing out that development in Unreal Engine is not this convoluted. I can't think right now because this is my first live stream. We are learning together. All right, so we've got a true there. So we do know that the selected interactable is valid when we are close to this actor, which means that everything should be working. So what we're going to do here is if we are setting a valid interactable, I want to show UI. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that maybe there's a problem with this function somehow. No, okay, so there we go. There we go. We've got the UI. It's been like 20 minutes, but we figured out what's wrong with the UI, kind of, sort of, by removing the problem and adding new logic to where the problem was before we added the logic to fix this stuff. Yeah, we'll go with that. So, what we're going to do now is we just need to set up a little bit of this stuff again. So we want to know if the incoming interactable does not equal the current selected interactable. So if the selected interactable is supposed to change, then we can set the selected interactable. And let's see here. Let's just make sure this is still working because it's possible that the problem was there. Who knows? The problem was there. Okay, so if the interactable coming in does not equal the selected interactable, do you see it? Do you see it? I hope you see it by now because it's already plugged in. Oh boy. Okay, so there we go. That was not the problem. That was a new problem. That's now solved. Fixed? Resolved? Something. And what we want to do as well, we also want to go ahead and turn off the UI if we're unselecting it. So, actually, I think the easiest way to do this is once we enter this function, we can store the selected object locally. And then also, I don't think you're going to be watching this later, but I guess Max is gone. Hope you have a good day. Once we've got all of this set up here, we can also grab this local variable. No, we can't. That was silly. What we actually want to do is... Oh, no. Okay, so we actually do want that. I'm just going to undo like 50 times. And we've got that back. That's going to store the old selected object. We're going to set the new selected object. And then we're going to add a sequence in here. And once we've set the new one, we can drag off of here, make this a validated get. And if it is valid, we can just hide the UI for this one. And that'll make sure that when we walk away, it should remove that UI there. And this is going much more smooth now. This is kind of how I expected most of this to go. I don't know why we spent 30 minutes making a UI show up on the screen, but hey guys, this is my first live stream. But the UI is there now. So what we can do finally is get to actually interacting with the object. So if we go to our interactable here, we can add another widget here for interact message. I'm going to make this a text. And by default, it's just going to say interact. You could put this directly on your widget. I find that it's easier just to have it on the component because then you don't have to make the same function like 4 times, like the show UI function. But once we've got this message here, what we want to do is go back to our widget, and where we've got this text, we just want to make that a variable, and we're going to call that the interact message text. Oh. I don't know if anyone's disappointed that I just removed those messages from the account with the X's in the name, but sorry, you're going to have to go somewhere else to find a scam. My apologies. Now that we've got this message here and it's a variable, what we can do is create a function by cleaning that up for no reason and then clicking the plus function button. And I'm going to go set interact message. We can accept a text called message, and then just drag this out and set the text. Okay. And that is on the widget itself, which means I'm actually just going to jump back over here to our component helper, the function library. And before I do that, remember to drink your water. Okay, and now that we've done that, what we're going to want to do is make one more function and call it set interact message. Capitals aren't important, but I like them. This can take a message. And we are also going to want that to, let's see, we get our interact component. Which is this one. Interactable. Yeah. We've got our show UI here, but we're also going to want a set message. And this one we do have to make a couple of times, but it does make things a little easier. Most of them are just going to be rerouted from one function to another. This one can also just be a message. And from the component, we have our interact UI. So we can get why am I making a function here? Oh yeah, we can delete that function. That's not important. What we want to do here is we want to get the interactable component, which means we actually need a component to input for this to work. Just like all of the other ones. Oh, actually we're passing an actor in. Okay, so I'm going to make that an actor. That's why I made the other ones the blueprints rather than the components, because I'm passing an actor into the function library. This is my first live stream, guys. But for this, we are going to pass in an actor, and we want to get its component, and we want to set the interact message. We want to get its component. We want to get the widget. And we want to set the interact message. VP interact widget. Get widget. Get widget. Set. No, that's not the one. Oh, this is great, guys. This is not my second live stream. It's not even my third. It's my first. Thanks for watching. So once we've got this interactable component here, we can actually jump over to our interactable component. And this is where I want to make that function called setMessage. Not on the blueprint. So over here, we actually don't need to do anything with an input because we have this here. We can grab our interact widget, get the widget, and just to make sure, what is this returning? It's returning a user widget. So for this, we actually have to cast it to our interact widget, which was the issue we were having in our function library there. And then we can go set interact message, which is the function itself, and pass in this message. And that is on the component. So now if I go back to the function library and we have our component, I can go set interact message. Oh, this is great. Okay, so why does this not show up? I'm going to give this an input really quick, first of all, and call it message. And what we're going to do here, because, I mean, this should... this is my first live stream, guys. I've kind of lost track of what's going on here. Just give me a moment to browse over exactly what's going on. So we've got our interactable. And the interactable has this message, which should actually be a setting. This is never going to change. And we should never need to actually set the message from this component. Or if we do, we don't need this. So I'm actually just going to make this function private. This should never be called from outside this component. And all we're going to do is we're going to take this interact message and we're going to set the message to the message on the UI interact. And what that means is we can actually, before it was just saying text something or other, whatever it says by default. Let's see here. Before it was just saying text block. But if all of this is set up properly, we don't actually want to change the message itself because the interactable component is responsible for which message will be shown on the interactable widget. We just need a way for the interactable component to be able to easily change that. So I'm actually going to delete this function here because I'm being a little ridiculous. And what we're going to do instead Interactable, set message. This should be in setup interactable. So once we've hidden the UI here, we're just going to set the message to be the message that's set as the setting on the component, which should work. So now you can see that that says interact. And we never really have to set anything up to change that because we're going to be changing it on the component itself. So like I could come into our AI and then go up here. And you can see if I go to settings, I can just go here and I can change that to talk. And then if I go over to the AI here, you can see that it says talk. However, it doesn't really matter where the camera's facing right now or where the character's facing. As long as the AI is within range, it's going to talk to it. And maybe that's what you want, but it's not really what I go for usually. And because of the issue that I found there with the vector math, I'm actually not entirely sure where we stand with this, so just give me one moment. I need to figure out exactly what it thinks this dot is, because something is not right. I don't quite know what it is. Yeah, so that is not, that's way wrong. There's something going on here. So, what rotation does it think the camera has? Okay, so I want to get the position of the interactable. I want to get the position of the owner. I want to subtract those. Do I? There's got to be a normalize in here. Is it here? Do we normalize here? That vector math is way wrong. I know it's extremely wrong. I don't know why it's wrong. But basically, right now, looking at this character, I believe it should be 1. And it lowers towards 0 there, which is correct. But see, like right here, when I'm 100% turned around the opposite direction, it goes to 1. Because it's an absolute, it should be -1. And then this is... Oh. Oh. Okay, wait one sec. Okay, so I think this actually just needs to return the yaw value, which we can do by splitting this and splitting that and just passing the yaw in there. And there's still not something 100% correct there. And I think it has to do with the position of the actors here. I don't quite know what's going on, and I don't exactly remember how I set this up in the actual system. But this is a live stream. It's all for fun. If anyone's got any other questions about anything else, I'm happy to explain how that works. I've been going here for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I do want to try and finish up this system, so we're going to go for a little bit longer, maybe 2.5, maybe 2:45, but I really don't want to push it much longer than that, so hopefully we can get this done soon. Again, though, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching. This is my first live stream. So, this is very, very wrong here. But I believe it might have something to do with the position of our stuff here, because the character is much lower than this. So what we're actually going to do here is I'm going to get this, and rather than just directly subtracting these, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to break the vectors. And then over here, actually, you know what? I'm just going to disconnect these here. I'm going to split these pins here. I'm going to split these pins over here. Then what we can do is pass in the X and Y. And then for the Z, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make them both the Z of the incoming actor. Or of the interactable, sorry. And I think, yeah, that's going to give us what we want there. So we're either 100% turned away from or 100% directed toward our target. None of this is necessary in the system that I have shown on my channel, which again is like a 45-second video. So if you are curious about how this actually works, go ahead and check that out. It's not extremely descriptive, but it's not wrong. This is wrong, but it's fun. Thanks for watching. So now we've got this set up here. However, you can see that when we're directly facing away, it's still actually showing 1, because here we're using an absolute value. So one thing that we want to make sure to do is make sure that this is not an absolute value. And then we want to be able to make sure that we're not actually trying to select this AI if we're looking 100% away from it, which you can see is already actually happening right now. Because if we are farther away than 0, which means if we're in the negative, it's actually just never going to set the best index or the best dot or anything. Or sorry, it'll do this. This will happen. But it will never pass this, because the dots here will never be greater than 0, which is the default value of the basic dot, of the best dot, of the dot that we need for this to happen. I just need to open a new water bottle here. Just give me one moment. My throat is getting a little dry. Okay. And yeah, so one thing we want to do in here as well is once we've figured out what our best dot is, making sure that it's over 0, it's possible that, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in here and I'm going to set the best dot to negative 0.9. And that's just going to make sure that it basically uses everything just for testing purposes. So if I come back in here now, you'll see that basically 100%. But at that point where we're at 100%, it's not going to show up, which just makes sure that there's not going to be any weirdness with the camera clipping on the object or anything like that. But maybe this should not be activating the AI's talk, right? Like if we're looking like this, sure, we want to talk to. If we're like this, maybe we want to talk to it. If we're like this, we probably don't want to talk to it. And if we do, then we need a more complicated system that actually takes the direction of the character into account as well, as we're running towards it here. But for now, it's been like 2 hours and we just got UI working, so we're just going to focus on the camera direction for now, because this is live. And not only is it live, it's my first live stream. Thanks for watching, guys. So what we want to do is we want to go in here, and when we're checking to see if sorry, this is all fine. This is all well and good. But then once we've figured out what our best is, we just want to make sure that it's actually passing a minimum threshold before we set it. So I'm going to throw a branch in here. And if this returns false, we actually just want to return a false with an empty variable. And if it returns true, we'll return this. And it will return true if the best dot is greater than. And keep in mind, if it's 1, it's directly in the center of the screen. And if it's 0, it's directly to the left or the right of the screen. But you have to keep in mind that it's taking into account the camera's direction, but it's actually positioning itself in world space for the vector math on the position of the interactor, which is a little complicated to try and figure out in your head. But typically I do this with, if it's a first-person game and you're trying to add a little bit of depth, something like 0.96 is normally good. But for this in particular, I'm going to set this to 0.8. And you'll see here if I walk up and go like this, it gives us a pretty good field of view for interacting with this AI. And because we're not using an absolute value, if we're not looking directly at the AI, it's actually just not going to interact at all. However, let's say that you move your camera like this, and as a designer, you want this to interact with the AI. All you have to do is go in here, and let's drag this out over here, and let's turn this into an absolute value again. And this will make sure that the value never goes below 0. So, come over here, it doesn't interact. We pass the halfway point, and now it's interacting again. Then the camera clips because I was too low, and the interaction threshold starts all over. So that's entirely up to you. If you're taking the direction of the interactor into account as well, like at this point the character is facing the AI, so even if the camera is turned like this, if you're running up to this AI, as a player you probably expect this to talk to the AI. And that requires a little bit more of a complicated system, though not really. Right here, we're setting up all of this stuff here with the best dots, or with all of the dots in general. You can basically just set it up so you've got the dots here for the difference between the interact location and the character's location based on the camera rotation. And then you could just do this exact same thing again for dots based on the direction of the character. And then when you figure out your best dot for both the character and the camera, all you really have to do is figure out what weight you want, which one should be more important, either the camera's direction or the character's direction, and then add a certain multiplier to the value of the dot of each one, depending on which one should be more valuable. And then that way, if the dot of the less valuable one ends up being less than the dot of the more valuable one, it'll know to use the bigger dot. But like I said, we're going to ignore that for now because this is my first live stream. And my brain is spaghetti. I do need another quick sip of water, though. Sorry about that. Oh, we've got another message here. New A Dating Online. Heart. Well, I'm new to live streaming, too. But I'm just going to go ahead and hide these messages here. I hope you don't mind. I'm new A to something, too. We all are at one point. Okay, so now we've got a minimum threshold here for our dot. Just for testing purposes, I'm going to put that to 0.4. And now we know whether or not we have a selected interactable. And the only thing left to do, now that we have a selected interactable, is to actually interact with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here because we don't get an input for that by default. I'm going to add another action mapping, and I'm going to call this interact. And I'm just going to set this to the E button, because why not? E button's pretty cool. You'd use the F button. If it's a first-person shooter, you might want to use your left click, unless there's a gun. Then you might want to use the F button, or the E button. They're both pretty cool. But now in our interactor, what we want to do is create another function, and we want to call it interact with selected. And then we're just going to grab our selected interactable, check whether or not it's valid. And the important thing is we go back to our interactable, and we want to create another function here called interact. And then I'm going to create an event dispatcher, and I'm going to call this onInteracted. We can drag off of here and go call. And this is going to call the onInteracted every time this interact function happens. And then in our interactor, we can come over here, and if we have a valid interactable, we are going to interact. And creating this event dispatcher just allows us to not have to set up logic here. Instead, we can set up logic in whatever class is going to be responsible for actually controlling that logic. And then we can just bind the components on interact function to an event on that actor. And to do that, I'm going to go to our AI character, and I'm going to create a new graph here, and I'm going to call it the binding graph. And I'm going to create a custom event called setup bindings. On here, I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to go bind on interacted. And we can create a new function for this, or we can create a new event for this. Interacted event. And when we interact with our AI character, I just want to print a string for now. We are going to get the display name of the AI. Then I'm going to drag off here and go append. And that one's going to be on B. And here we're going to go interacted with. Add a space at the end there. And I have a feeling this isn't going to work, but, oh, you know what? We didn't add the input to the player, so it's absolutely not going to work. If we go in here, we can add the interact event, which I called the exact same thing as everything else, so it's going to be pretty fun to find. Or maybe I just called it interact. Typing event makes that a little easier. And then down here, we just want to grab the component and go interact with selected. And then that's going to reroute to whatever event we bound to the onInteracted of the component. So I don't think this is going to work, but yeah. Something's a little off here. Okay, so that's going to interact with the selected of the interactor. The interactor has a selected component, I believe. Let's just throw a print in here. No selected interactable. Does that get called? Nope. So we are getting here, and it's calling that. But we are not setting up the bindings. And that is why setting up graphs for a single event is silly. But we're getting there. We're getting there. This is my first live stream, guys. We're learning together. And there you go. You can see now that if I press E, I'm interacting. And if the widget goes away, it says no selected interactable. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's how you interact. That is, it just took us 2.5 hours to set up a video that I've got on my channel that goes over this in 45 seconds. So if you're actually curious about how any of this works, please go and check that out. It's a great video. I think so anyway. It actually works. I mean, this works now too, but doesn't work as well. So just to recap this one more time, because first I need some water. All right, so just to recap this one more time, because my brain is soup, and I'm sure no one's following along. So what we've got is an AI here that can be interacted with, and that AI has an interactable component. This component is set up with a few functions that make the life of whoever's using it a little bit easier, assuming that it all works as well as it seems to right now, because it was set up pretty quick. And the way that that gets interacted with is with the interactor component. The interactor component is attached to the player character. Might even be attached, nope, is attached to the player character. You would probably want to put it on your base character, because right now you can interact with AI, but, sorry, depending on what you're setting up for your game, it's possible that you also want your AI to be You'll also want your AI to be able to interact with things. You don't necessarily want them to be able to interact with the same things that the character can interact with, but you might want them to be able to do things. And as a base, it's probably easier to create one component that's responsible for all actions, and then you can derive that component if you need to later to create a component that's separate for the player and the AI if that's really necessary. But we can take a look over here at the player character where we've got our interactor component. And I do have a setting here for the radius, and on the AI, the setting for the message and the offset. I just realized why we had one of the issues we had earlier. So currently the offset is set to put the widget above the character, obviously. And typically when you're looking at stuff like this, you can see there that the widget's actually pretty high above the character's head there. One thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm actually just going to go in here and I'm going to create a crosshair. I just want to show this quick. I don't know how much longer the stream is going to last, but this is kind of important, I guess. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to remember to put that canvas panel I talked about first. You can see there why you want it. And then I'm going to add in an image here, center it on the screen, center it on alignment, and just make this kind of small. And then one thing we want to do as well is I did set up a player character here. So in here, I'm just going to create widget. It's going to be our crosshair. Add to viewport. And one thing that I like to do, just because we're here, I might as well show. Every time you start your, sorry. So every time you start the, I forgot what I was going to say. Wow, that sucks. But, oh, yeah. So every time you start the game, your mouse is going to be disconnected from the window and nothing's happening. You have to click on the viewport. Pretty easy fix. Just set mode to game, set the input mode to game only, if I can type or talk. This is my first live stream, guys. We've been going for 2.5 hours. My brain was soup when we started. Now it's spaghetti. Soon it'll be lasagna. But we're learning together. Thanks for watching. So what we're going to do here is add the self. We're going to add the self. Very important note there. And now, when I do this, you can see that the mouse just auto-connects itself. Sorry for that. And yeah, we've also got the crosshair on the screen. And if I come over here, you can see just how up we have to move the camera to be able to get to this crosshair. That's why none of the values were working earlier with the vector math. Typically, there's going to be objects on the ground. So, right, you're going to be looking down to pick them up. And you want to be able to look over one to select another. That's very important when dealing with objects that are on the ground or on a table or anything like that. But when you're interacting with someone like this, like with an AI, and the widget is going to be above their head, it's not really going to work properly unless you're directly looking at the widget. And so that's why I removed the Z value there. If I just come back to the interactable here and go to, if I go to the interactor and go to get best interactable, up here I set the Z value of both the interactor and the interactable to the Z value of the interactor, because that way we don't have to worry about the values not working properly. But if you're setting this up in a game for yourself, and I do believe this is in the other video that I have, as well as the logic for doing characters as well, possibly, though it's very quick. One thing you can do is you can actually set, let's see here. So in this interactor here, in the interactable here, we have this function for get interact location. And this is returning the location of the widget. However, this isn't necessarily what we're going to want to do if we're dealing with an AI. So what we can actually just do here, just to display how this is working. So right now, if I walk up to this character, you can see that I can look about this far before that widget goes away. However, if we come in here and I go to get best interactable, I'm actually just going to set this Z value back to what it's supposed to be. And you'll see here that it works at a much smaller range. Rather than being able to go basically halfway, it ends here. But if I look up, this is my first live stream, guys. I don't know what I'm talking about right now. So let's just say we're doing this right here. My vector math is very wrong. It's better in that video. So yeah, let's just ignore the crosshair for now. That's not doing us any good. So there was one more thing I wanted to show here. So now we're interacting with this AI. But actually, no, I guess that's pretty much it. We're interacting with the AI, and we were just doing the overview. Which I guess we're done now, and then I went into that rant about setting something else up. Because this is my first live stream, and much like game development as a whole, overscoping is a problem. It's a serious problem, guys. So do your homework. And yeah. I actually think that's all I'm going to do for today. Thank you, everyone who watched. Thank you to anyone who watched the VOD later. It really does mean a lot to me. I'm putting a lot of effort into this channel lately, trying to get things going. I should have prepared better for this, but I planned this 2 days ago, and I didn't even set up a schedule. I just kind of planned to go live at 1 p.m. my time, and that's it. So I hope this hectic mess was enjoyable. And yeah, hope you have a great day.